Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Maayan Talks MLS. It's episode 4, and quite frankly, today I'm just going to go over how game one of every series in MLS Cup Playoffs went. We had games going from Friday all the way through Wednesday. Didn't have games on Saturday, which is a little bit weird from MLS, but I'm not going to go into that too much. I'll do Eastern Conference first, look at every single game one, kind of how it went, what I thought of it, at least the ones that I watched, and what I think is going to go on further in the series. And then same thing, Western Conference, and then we'll see how that goes. So the very, very first game of the MLS Cup playoffs, not including the wildcard games, was Inter Miami against Nashville SC on Friday night, and quite frankly, it was just a horrible performance for Nashville. I mean, they went into the game trying to play extremely defensive, sitting back and hoping to catch Miami off guard, I guess, on counterattacks and off little mistakes. And they nearly did early in the game. Jacob Schaffelberg had a few good chances that he kind of just fluffed his lines on. Um, and then it was Nashville who made errors, specifically Palacios at the back, leading to Messi's first goal. And from then on, it was kind of all Miami until about the 85th minute. And I mean, fair play to Miami. They did well. They generated their chances. They capitalized off of Nashville's mistakes. And Nashville, on the other hand, what I thought was weird was that they didn't play direct at all. Like, you've got Jacob Schaffelberg on one wing, kind of either Mukhtar or Surridge on the other. And at least for Schaffelberg's side, I mean, Jordi Alba's playing as a winger the entire time, so there's really no fullback there. It's going up against Noah Allen every time, essentially dragging him out wide, and then you've just got one center back in Falcone in the middle, and they didn't utilize that at all. I know Schaffelberg didn't have the best of games at all, but regardless, I think it was poor from Nashville to not do that. And on top of that, the fact that they didn't play through Sam Surridge was baffling, because when you've got a center back partnership of Allen and Falcone, who are both not very tall, especially Allen, and not super dominant in the air or anything, it seems weird to me that you don't try and utilize that. And the one time they did, in the 90th minute, played a cross into Surridge, he headed it and hit the bar. And I know at that point it was already 3-0, so it's kind of a different story. Like, it didn't matter all that much. But regardless, I think it's weird that you don't try and utilize Sam Surridge as much as you can in that kind of situation. And the fact that he was playing as kind of an inverted left winger, I also found quite weird. I thought, like, utilize the fact that you have a number 9 rather than playing Mukhtar as a false 9 and having him drop in deeper to receive the ball. Just utilize Sam Surridge for what he's good at. He scored so many goals with his head, and just his aerial presence is certainly there, especially against center backs that are not that tall and not that aerially dominant. And he just didn't do anything with it. And it's surprising to me, and quite frankly, it's why Nashville lost in the way that they did. Fair play to Miami. They, like I said, capitalized off of Nashville's mistakes and just played a much better game. That's all I can really say here. I think Messi was Messi, obviously. He was great. Rodrigo de Paul was a lot better, a lot more involved than he has been in a lot of other games, pretty much every single game since he joined the club. And Noah Allen and Falcone dealt with what they had to do pretty well. I thought, I mean, because Nashville didn't play through Sam Surridge pretty much at all. Like, I don't know how many touches he had on the ball, but it was a very, very low amount. I know that for sure. They did what they were supposed to do. Miami got the win, and I don't think Nashville can come back in this series. Like, I see a scenario in which they win game 2 at Geodis Park, but I don't know how likely it is that they win 2 games here. Like, this Miami performance, if Miami show up anything like they did in that first game, and then if Nashville show up playing anything like they did in that first game, this is going to be a comfortable win for Miami. And unless Nashville play absolutely perfect, like, the US Open Cup winner Nashville, like the semifinal win against Philadelphia, that kind of performance, I don't see Nashville winning this game, and I think they'd get eliminated here. Because quite frankly, I mean, when you play Inter Miami, you can't make mistakes because they've got the greatest player of all time in attack. They've got Luis Suarez, who's still a very, very capable MLS striker. Allende's still good. Baltasar Rodriguez has had very good moments. Jordi Alba has been really, really good when going forward in the attack this year. And I just don't see a scenario in which Nashville advance from this round, or let alone even win game two. I think it's very, very unlikely that Nashville win game two, and I think even if they do, going back to Miami for game three, I don't think they get it done. This isn't like Atlanta last year, where at least Atlanta had promising moments in game one, and you thought, okay, maybe they can put up a fight. Nashville looked hopeless, and it was sad to see, and I hope that they can at least redeem themselves and maybe even get a result in game two and push it to game three, but it's extremely unlikely. I don't see a scenario in which it happens. So realistically, I think Miami advanced from this one fairly comfortably. And then the second game in the Eastern Conference was Philadelphia Union against Chicago Fire. And up until about the 84th minute, it kind of looked like a Philadelphia Union game where you capitalize off the opponent's mistakes, you hit them on the counter. It was essentially just two bad plays from Jonathan Bamba to give them the two goals. It was great goals from Vasilev. The ball he got from Mikhail Rura was fantastic, and then good touch, good finish. And Olowski's goal was great as well. And Philly did what they were supposed to do. They hit a team on the counter. They defended well for most of the game, and then came the 84th minute. Jonathan Bamba scores one, and suddenly, just pretty much out of nowhere, Jack Elliott scores the equalizer. Of course, it had to be Jack Elliott who does it, and this game goes to penalties. And I want to say this is great from a Chicago perspective because I think they're going to look at this and say, okay, we can beat this team, especially at Soldier Field. And I think they probably do get it done in game two. That being said, I don't think this is a result that worries Philly too much because for about 85 minutes of that game, they were the better team. And don't get me wrong, Chicago had chances, and I think this would be a very, very different game if Phillips Incarnago was on the pitch or if Brian Gutierrez had started, which I don't understand why Haile Selassie started ahead of Gutierrez once they found out that Incarnago was injured. But regardless, I think it's a super tough blow. No matter if it's Gutierrez or Haile Selassie on the pitch, they're not going to have the same sort of productivity that you get from Phillips Incarnago. And Chicago still have a lot of it, firepower in the attack. You've got Hugo Kuipers, who's one of the best strikers in MLS. You've got Jonathan Bamba, who's a very, very capable winger. You've got Brian Gutierrez, who I assume will start game two, and I think he should. Haile Selassie is still a very good option, and I think the Chicago team do have hope. Way more hope than Nashville do, for that matter. Do I think they win this series? Probably not. I think even if they do win game two, I think they take it to 3 games. I don't think they win that game three. I've seen crazier things happen, so maybe there's a scenario in which Chicago end up winning this in 3, but I don't think they get it done. However, I do think it's very promising for them, the way they came back in that game one, and the fact that they gave Philly a tough time, quite frankly. In the first half of that game, yes, Philly were the better team, but it's not like Chicago were bad at all. This isn't, like I said, it's not like Nashville, who looked completely hopeless against Miami. Chicago had genuine opportunities and played decent. And I think at Soldier Field, in front of their home fans, they probably get it done. And I hope they do, because I want to see a game three in this, because I think this is one of the more competitive series we're going to get, especially with how everything else went down. And I'm excited to see how it goes down in game two in Chicago. And then now, moving on to the third game in the Eastern Conference, it's FC Cincinnati Columbus Crew. The hell is real derby. Cincinnati come out with a 1-0 win in game one and were the better team. Let's not get it wrong. They were the better team in this game against Columbus and deserved the win. I'm not. I'm still not that convinced of Cincinnati because it is very similar to the Cincinnati we've seen all season, where it kind of just one moment of brilliance gets them over the line. And the fact that they're pretty good defensively, but that being said, they were still vulnerable at times. And if Columbus either had better players on the pitch or just better finishing on the day, they equalize and maybe even win that game. They had Gazdag had a good opportunity when he came on. Andres Herrera had a couple of good opportunities in that game as well. Like this wasn't a bad performance from Columbus, but I just don't think I don't think Columbus did enough to win that game. I think Cincinnati were the better team. They generated the better chances. Probably should have scored more than one, but regardless, good performance from Cincinnati. One that doesn't convince me too much that in a bigger game, say next round they face Miami. I'm not sure they get it done against that Miami team because Miami can expose them and Miami can come up like Messi can come up in the big moments where Lassi Lappalainen can't because he's Lionel Messi and not Lassi Lappalainen, right? And for Columbus, I think they do still have a chance in this series. I'm not like far less confident than I was going into this. I did say initially that I think Columbus are going to upset Cincinnati here, and part of me still believes that. But I think it really depends on what kind of lineup Wilfried Nancy puts out on the pitch. I don't think you can have Diego Rossi as kind of the sole number 9, and I know he didn't really, like he's never really played as a 9, and that's kind of what I mean. You can't rely on him to be that guy. He needs to feed off of others. Like say you chuck a Jason Russell-Rowe in there, even if he hasn't performed the best, it's at least someone else for Diego Rossi to play off of and produce, simply, quite frankly, produce. Like, I think to at least have a number 9 presence in that team is what you need from a Columbus perspective to get Rossi going. And then if Gazdag starts, which I think he should, just because he's another guy that can feed off Rossi or Rossi can feed off him, same sort of thing. It's tough. I think Columbus, obviously, with a healthy Wissam Abu Ali, this is a very different story. And with Rossi 90 minutes fit 100% of the time, like he's just coming off of an injury that kept him out for a while. This is a different story with a healthy Columbus team. But Cincinnati have injuries too. Matt Miazga's out. Obi Nwobodo played like 8 minutes last game. It's not like this is a full strength Cincinnati team against a weakened Columbus side. Both sides are weakened. Both sides are vulnerable. And I think for Columbus, it was good to see Andres Herrera get so much on the ball and get forward a lot. He had their best chances of the game, I think. And I think he can be the difference maker going forward in this. But more importantly, I think, like I said, it needs to be Diego Rossi getting on the ball and feeding off of others rather than trying to create it for himself. Because I just don't think he's never been that kind of guy. He's always had another good player to feed off of, whether it be Cucho or Carlos Vela or whoever, right? He's obviously a phenomenal player, but he needs someone else to help him carry that load, let's say, if that makes sense. So I think you do start a Jason Russell-Rowe, even just to have a number 9 figure in there that can lay the ball off to Rossi for him to get in better positions, or for Rossi to play Jason Russell-Rowe through, that sort of thing. Whether it's Russell-Rowe or even get Tara Bruin on the pitch, just because he's a bit of something else. I don't know, maybe over Lappalainen or Picard, who hasn't looked very promising. I mean, he's shown signs of promise, but in the playoffs when it matters, he's just not that kind of guy yet, and you shouldn't expect him to be. So I think Columbus still have a very good chance of at least winning game 2. I'm not as confident in them completing the upset. I thought they needed to get a result in Cincinnati to do that. I mean, they obviously still could in a game 3. It's still possible. I'm not going to say that it's not. I think Columbus, if they get their pieces right, if they get Rossi going, different kind of guys stepping up, it's possible, especially because this Game 2 is probably going to be Darlington Nagby's last game at Lower.com Field. Like, almost certainly, unless, they make it to a conference final and it's against Chicago. I think that's the only other scenario in which it happens. I think Columbus fans are going to be behind the team massively because it's a rivalry and because it's going to be Nagby's last game at the stadium. Maybe with the club if they lose this. But regardless, I think Columbus have a chance here. They just difference makers need to step up, and by difference makers, I mostly mean Diego Rossi, potentially Daniel Gazdag if he even gets in the lineup. And then moving on to our last game of the Eastern Conference Round 1, it's Charlotte FC 0, New York City FC 1. Now, this was really, really poor from Charlotte, especially starting off the game. They didn't look like the home team. Like, simply put, they looked like they were the away team. New York had the ball more than them and created more than them. New York were the better team for almost the whole game until maybe the 80th minute when Charlotte were just desperately pushing for a goal. I think New York did very well in this game. I thought Kevin O'Toole was good on the left-hand side. Alonso Martinez, obviously that goal was phenomenal, just going through about 4 guys, and whether or not they should have done better, yes, they should have, but regardless, it's really, really well done from Alonso Martinez in that spot. But from Charlotte, it's just not good enough in a home playoff game, and I know Dean Smith was complaining about the fact that it's a Tuesday, so didn't get as many fans out, didn't feel that sort of playoff atmosphere, but I don't care. Like, your team needs to step up. There's still about 30,000 people in the stadium. Why are you playing like you're an away team and you're like you're DC United? And that might be a bit too harsh, but they didn't create anything until the 80th minute. Like, the Alabada, I love him. He was useless, genuinely useless. I thought Kerwin Vargas was a little bit better, but both kind of just they didn't play through them at all. They didn't look for Abada and Toffolo had a tough time trying to link up with each other. Toffolo would maybe try to overlap, but Abada likes occupying that wide space, so it just wasn't kind of feasible. And just in general, it was a bad performance from Charlotte. They didn't create anything for Idanto Clamati, and he can't create it all for himself. It's just poor all around from Charlotte. I thought in the midfield, Gianni was not very good. Actually, Westwood was not very good. Genuinely, I thought their best player on the day was Brandon Cambridge, who came on in like the 85th minute and at least tried to create something, because that's the kind of standard you had, because they were just bad all game. They didn't create any good goal-scoring chances until about the 80th, 85th minute, and they just didn't do anything. They didn't control the middle of the pitch. Like I said, they played like they were DC United. They played like an away team. Like, fair play to New York. They came in, they did what they were supposed to do. They did it very well. I thought they played a very, very good game, especially given their way at the bank, which is a tough place to play at, even if it's a Tuesday night and it's cold and rainy, whatever. It was a really good performance in New York and a deserved win. And they probably could have, maybe even should have scored more than one. And I don't think Charlotte come back from this. Now, obviously, Wilfried Zaha is going to be back for game 2. And you could say that maybe that's the reason that they lost, is the fact that he wasn't there, because they didn't really have much creativity in general in the final third or at all. Like, Zaha's pretty much the only guy in that starting 11 who can create something out of nothing, right? Like, Kerwin Vargas is not the type of guy who can deliver a good ball or take on 3 guys out of nowhere. Like, Zaha's the only guy in the team that can really do that. And if you don't have him in there, you're kind of screwed for Charlotte, because they rely on him massively. They rely on, other than him, the player they rely on most is Christian Colina, the goalkeeper, who was obviously very crucial in that historic win streak that they had. Yeah, I don't think Charlotte go to New York and get it done. I think Yankee Stadium is one of the hardest stadiums to play in just because it's not a familiar surface. They already went there once this year, obviously, and lost. They lost 2-0, I think. Zaha missed a pen and also Martinez scored 2 pens. I think they're going to have a really tough time away from home at Yankee Stadium. And like I said, I don't think they get it done. And as much as I want to see a game 3 here, because I think this can be one of the more competitive series, we didn't see it in game 1, and I don't think we'll see it in game 3 because I think this ends in 2. I don't like Charlotte's chances of going away to Yankee Stadium, getting a win, whether it be in penalties or in the 90 minutes, even with Wilfried Zaha in the team. I think it's going to be too tough of an environment to play in to, it's every team that goes to Yankee Stadium does tend to struggle because it's a baseball stadium. Like, it's not the surface you're used to playing on. It's not like the pitch is extremely narrow. Doesn't feel like you're playing football in there. I mean, I had to watch the Whitecaps play there in 2023, and it was tough. It was tough for me to watch my team play there. Yeah, I think Charlotte obviously have a chance. I don't think they get it done. I think this ends in 2. I think New York City FC move on to face probably the Philadelphia Union. But I genuinely like Chicago's chances more than I do Charlotte's. Now, to move on to the Western Conference, and let's get into my beloved Vancouver Whitecaps with one of the more dominant playoff performances I've ever seen, maybe just ever in general, regardless if playoff or not. Dallas didn't have a single shot in that game. Their best chance was they had 2. There was I think Anderson Julio went through on goal. Yoi Takaoka saved it, and then Eddie Ocampo kind of jogged over to the line and cleared it. It was offside though. And then there was one where Bernie Kamunga was played in over the top. He went past Yoi Takaoka, probably should have done better there, and then scuffed his shot, skied it, but that was offside as well. Those were Dallas's only 2 chances really, and the Whitecaps scored 3 goals. Should have scored like 6 probably with the amount of chances, especially just Emmanuel Sabi had in the first half. I think like I said, it was an amazing performance from the Caps. And the thing I was scared about most, and I talked about it on here, is the fact that Petar Musa would be going up against Ralph Priestman and Bilal Halbouni as a center back duo. And they didn't struggle at all. Dallas tried to play through Musa. They tried to launch the ball over to him, kind of like what Nashville should have done against Miami. And it didn't trouble the Caps at all. And it's interesting because first of all, I thought it was weird that they didn't start, Eric Wold didn't start Logan Farrington. I thought he was guaranteed to be in the starting lineup because that's what worked so well for them for so long. But I guess they wanted to go for the kind of direct approach of having Sam Sarver and Anderson Julio behind Musso you can either feed off of, or kind of just how Sarver drew the red card on Matias Laborda on decision day. Send it over the top. He's faster than pretty much anyone in the Whitecaps back line. Maybe Ocampo is the only exception, but it feels like he would get to that ball almost every time. So kind of just use that, but they didn't even do that either. They barely played the ball over the top. Pretty much every time they did, it was either overhit or a Whitecaps player got to it first because there was a lot of miscommunication within Dallas. And the Caps just outplayed them in every single way possible. And like I said, should have scored a lot more than 3 goals. Michael Collodi had another good performance. Obviously not as good as his decision day performance, where he was phenomenal, but still a much better performance than most goalkeepers put in every night. And it still wasn't enough. It still wasn't even close to being enough. And I think this is by far the least likely upset to happen now. Dallas they showed nothing, genuinely, absolutely nothing, stating that to show that they have a chance of winning in Game 2 in Dallas, in Frisco, and making it to Game 3. And the Caps, I mean, now Matias Laborda is going to be back as well, so realistically, it's probably going to be Ralph Priso gets dropped from the starting 11, although you never know. It also depends on what Eddie Ocampo's injury is looking like. He went down in training yesterday, and today was just training in the gym. So we'll see what the updates are on that, if he's able to make the trip, if he's able to play. But regardless, the Caps should win this fairly easily. This is, like I said, the least likely upset I think to happen. And especially because Dallas isn't that tough of a place to play, especially right now where half their stadium is under construction, so it just doesn't look intimidating or anything at all, right? An away player goes there, and there aren't that many fans there because I think the capacity is around 11,000. And when I watched it on TV, it genuinely feels like we're back in COVID because the stand that is under construction is the one that the camera can see, so it's just covered, and it looks like what we had during COVID, during MLS is back, or after that as well. I think the Whitecaps win this game two also fairly comfortably, maybe not as easily as game one, just because it is in Dallas this time. But either way, it's most likely going to be almost definitely, like I'm 99% certain that the Whitecaps win this game too and move on to the Western Conference semifinal. Then our next game in the Western Conference was San Diego FC against Portland Timbers. 2-1 to San Diego was the final score. And after the first 30-ish minutes, it looked like it was going to be a kind of similar game to the Whitecaps against Dallas when San Diego went up 2-0 pretty early on. Around the 30th minute was when Anders Dreyer scored the 2-0 goal after Ani Valakari scored just a few minutes before. And at that point, it kind of looked like the Timbers were out of it until one good win of the ball by Diego Chara, and then Anthony and Christopher Velde finally linked up together. Velde scores, makes it 2-1, and the Timbers at least have some life. But from that point on, they threatened, but San Diego were just the better team, and they are the better team overall. They play a more exciting brand of football, and I think if they had played a team that's more solid defensively, this might be a little bit more tough for them, because say the team wins the ball ahead of them because of how high San Diego like to push forward, especially with their fullbacks and just their whole team in general, teams can catch you out. Like in the next round, say you face a Minnesota, they've got a lot of pace in guys like Bongi Longwane, and we saw in the Minnesota-Seattle game, we saw Longwane have a very, very early chance where he just beat Jackson Reagan for pace and should have scored or gotten a penalty, whatever you think about that. And I mean, it's not an issue against Portland because they're just not good enough defensively to win the ball that often and hurt San Diego on the counterattack that often, even though they have the tools to at least go on the counter. They did so. That was how they scored their goal, right? But I don't think they have enough of that, and I don't think the Timbers win game two here. I think San Diego probably advanced relatively comfortably as well, because it should have been a lot more comfortable in game one as well. I think they were unlucky not to score third or fourth goal. And it's going to be even more difficult for Portland because of Jimmer Forey getting sent off, which was quite a funny sequence. I watched it back, and I think there was about 50 seconds in between the first yellow and second yellow. And the first yellow, you could argue, was even a red. Like, he might be lucky to not get a red there. He puts his arm up into, like, close to the face at least. Maybe not into the face, but regardless, I think he had it coming for him when he then went in for a challenge about 40 seconds later and got himself sent off. So I have more confidence in Portland than I do in Dallas, but that goes from about 1% to maybe 5%. So realistically, I think San Diego win this and advance to the Western Conference semifinal as well. Next up on Monday, we had Minnesota against Seattle. 0-0, and Minnesota winning pens in one of the weirdest penalty shootouts I'd seen. You had 3 posts in a row to win the game, and that's not something you see too often. But about the game itself, it kind of played out how a lot of people thought it would. Minnesota very early on had that Longwane chance that I talked about, and I think I can see why people are making the argument that it should have been a penalty. Reagan does put his hand on Longwane's back. Longwane feels the contact and goes down. But I think Longwane should, he goes down too easily. And that's the problem, is the fact that he can get a clear shot on target, probably score. And instead he chooses to go down to try and win a penalty when he's 10 yards away from goal, has a clear chance, he's through on goal, feels a little bit of contact on his back and goes down. And I think that's the problem, is that there wasn't enough contact to say that it's definitely a foul. I think Reagan knows what he's doing and he's very smart in it, but I don't think you can definitively say with VAR that it is a penalty because the contact isn't that severe. And if I was a Minnesota fan, I would more so be mad at Bongi Longwane for not trying his best to stay up and take a shot, because Longwane is looking to go down. He obviously still shoots as he goes down. I think that's just because he thinks, oh, you know what, worst case scenario, I score, right? But I think it's poor from him to go down there. I think he could have stayed up. I think he could have scored, and then this is a very different game after that, because I mean, obviously Minnesota win regardless on penalties, and that's kind of what Minnesota do. It's if there's any team that would want to win on penalties, it is Minnesota United. That's kind of how they're built to defend, trying to hit teams on the counter as much as they can. If that doesn't work out, you have Dane St. Clair, one of the best goalkeeper. My goalkeeper of the year, should win goalkeeper of the year, and maybe the best in MLS when it comes to pens as well. And for Seattle, I think it's just about the fact that they weren't clinical. I know St. Clair's good. I already mentioned that. He had a good performance. He had some big saves. The one on Danny Masovsky, had one on, I think, Christian Roldan, which was pretty good as well. I think St. Clair was very good, but I think Seattle should have done a lot better with some of their chances. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that Jordan Morris just wasn't good at the 9. And I know he is a striker. He does play as a number 9, but he hasn't been effective. And that's the problem, is he gets into decent positions and he can't do much with it. And I think it did change when Danny Musovski came on, and pretty much immediately at those two big chances. There was one from 4 yards out that St. Clair saves. I think he also had a header that went just over the bar. And those are the positions that Morris wasn't getting in. And those are the chances he wasn't getting because he just didn't do well enough. And I think next game in Seattle, Musovski should start. And I'm not saying it should be over Jordan Morris. I think Morris would be good out wide in this kind of game, maybe even interchanging with Danny Musovski. But regardless, I think Musovski should start in that number 9 position. And whether that means that Paul Rothrock gets dropped from the lineup, or Jesus Ferreira, or even both, and you bring in Georgie Manungu because he's more dangerous, quite frankly, in 1v1 positions. He's more likely to be able to win a 1v1 duel and get ahead of the Minnesota defender and get a ball into the box than pretty much anyone else in that Seattle lineup is. But I don't think Seattle are going to be mad at their performance. I think they played well. They did what they usually do. And on another day, they might even score 2 goals. I think going back to Seattle, really the only change that should be made is getting Danny Musovski in that lineup, because at least you have a more prominent number 9 figure in that lineup to win those aerial duels, to get into better goal scoring positions, and Jordan Morris can still create from out wide, tuck inside to play as the number 9 occasionally. But yeah, I think I'm still confident that Seattle can win Game 2 and Game 3. Do I think they will? No, I don't. I think they win Game 2, but I think Minnesota at home in Game 3 it's too much. Too much for Seattle, and I think especially if Kelvin Yeboah works his way back to full health and they finally have a number 9 presence there, rather than a Bongilongwane or a Robin Lod playing as a false nine. I think once they get Kelvin Yeboah fully integrated into the lineup, it's if they can in this series. If not, then even if he plays 45 minutes off the bench, I think that's much better than having Longwane up there for almost the entire game. I think at that point it's Minnesota's series to lose, and I mean it certainly is now because they won game one. And on to our last game of round one, which once again I'm going to say I think it's bizarre that these two teams, as well as I guess Charlotte and NYCFC and the teams that played on Monday and everyone, more specifically though, these two teams in LAFC and Austin had a week and a half of rest after decision day, whereas you had Chicago and Portland playing in the wildcard game on Wednesday last week, and then both of them playing their first game of round one on Sunday. They had basically no rest. They had like 3-4 days after decision day, and then the same thing after the wildcard game. Whereas Charlotte and NYCFC get about a week and a half off, as do LAFC and Austin. But let's just skip over that. Let's dive into that LAFC Austin game. So LAFC come out with a 2-1 win. You had a Brendan Heinzike own goal, which essentially just came from Ryan Hollingshead doing what he does best, getting into a dangerous position, playing a ball across. Heinzike tries to clear it, doesn't go as planned, goes in. John Gallagher at the equalizer, and then Nathan Ordaz in a goal that at the time when I first saw it, I thought was offside, and I think he thought it too with the way in which he reacted to that to him touching it when it was going in, and maybe he was just reacting like that because he thought, oh no, I stole Denny Bouanga's goal. But yeah, LAFC come out with the win, and it's not the most convincing win I've ever seen. I think they didn't look great, especially in the second half. I think first half, LAFC got into the better positions, and Austin, other than a spell of possession in maybe the last 3 minutes of the first half, Austin just couldn't get near LAFC's box, couldn't even get near LAFC's final third. And that was because of how LAFC set up. They knew what they wanted to do. They hit Austin on the counter. Bouanga had a very good chance that probably would have gone in had it not been for John Gallagher tracking back and making a fabulous challenge to just send it out for a corner instead. But then Austin came alive in the second half. They went more direct at LAFC, played dangerous balls into the box, which is kind of what I wanted them to do for pretty much the entirety of the first half, because first of all, they didn't send anyone to be a presence in the box, not Mirtu Zuni, not anyone else. And they didn't try and be dangerous, really. I think they were just more happy with going down to halftime just 1-0 down. And then coming out of halftime, they were the better team for the most part, pretty much, until about the 70th minute. They were the better team. They created the better chances, got them the goal for John Gallagher because they just created some chaos. Dessler played a ball into the box. I think Eddie Segura headed it down. He tried to head it away, headed it down at Ryan Porteous, who wasn't even looking. And then Owen Wolf gets on the ball, lays it off to John Gallagher, who finishes very well. It's 1-1, and then at that point, I thought Austin were going to go on and win it. And that was pretty much until Nathan Ordaz came on and was for a midfielder, and they kind of switched back to what they've been playing for basically ever since Sun signed, which is kind of that 3-4-2-1, having Bouanga and Ordaz behind Sun, and from that point on, LAFC were on the front foot again. And that's not to say that Austin still didn't have chances, especially after Ordaz scored, but LAFC were the better team for majority of that game. Even if it wasn't the most convincing, they got their win. And do I think they win game 2 in Austin? No. I think Austin, in front of their home crowd, know that they can win this game, and that game 1 probably gives them a lot of confidence because of how they played and the fact that they won at LAFC, and the fact that, say LAFC do go back to that two-man midfield because it worked well to end that game, or even in the three-man midfield with Tillman playing more so as a 10, so pushing quite high up, is if you get the ball into an Owen Wolf or Danny Pereira, then they beat one midfielder, they suddenly have so much room to run forward and play it off to Bakari or Zuni or whoever else, Gallagher, any of those. There's a lot of good opportunities for Austin to break down this LAFC team. And the vulnerabilities were there. They saw that, and I think they're going to go in with a lot of confidence for this game too. I think this is going to be genuinely maybe the most competitive games 2 and probably 3, because I think Austin win game 2. I think LAFC probably end up coming out on top in game 3 anyways, just because of the amount of quality they have. Even aside from Danny Blanc and Heung-min Son, having a guy like Tim Tillman, Chouanier has been phenomenal, Mark Delgado, the back line is pretty good too. Like Hollingshead and Palencia are great players. Ryan Porteous, Segura is alright as well. Hugo Lloris is a very good goalkeeper. Like, even if his stats don't show it, you can still show up in big games. He's done that for a lot of his career, at Tottenham and with France. I think there's just too much quality around this team for them to go out in the first round, quite frankly. And this isn't like a Miami last year where it was just a bunch of old guys and they didn't care that much. They didn't know how much like it means, say, maybe. Where Miami this year are much more well-oiled, let's say. For LAFC, like, Son's not that old. Bouanga's in his prime. And the rest of the team is pretty good MLS players. Like, players that have proved themselves in MLS throughout the years and know how to get it done. I think they do get it done in this first round in 3 games, though. I think Austin do take game 2. And I would not be surprised, maybe a little surprised, but I would not be too surprised if Austin end up coming out on top in the series. I think it's unlikely, but it's much more likely than basically any other series in the West. Assuming we don't count a Seattle beating Minnesota thing as an upset, because it's a 4v5 really, like it's not anything crazy. It's been done in the past, and it's always the most even matchup, let's say. So I think this is the most likely upset to happen in the West, and maybe in the whole league. I don't think anyone in the East has a better chance than Austin do against LAFC. Like I said with Seattle and Minnesota, I don't think NYCFC beating Charlotte would be an upset per se. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Just a quick review of the of round 1, game 1 in every single playoff series in MLS. I'm gonna be back probably sometime next week to round off game 2s, preview game 3s from whatever games are still left. And I'll see you next time. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, whether on YouTube, on Spotify, whatever. And I'll see you next time.